Today we're going to tell you about rock and roll music. Rock and roll music is a genre of popular music that originated and evolved in the United States during the late 1940s and early 1950s. From musical styles such as gospel, jump blues, jazz, boogie-woogie, and rhythm and blues, along with country music. While elements of what was to become rock and roll can be heard in blues records from the 1920s and in country records of the 1930s, the genre did not acquire its name until 1954. The origins of rock and roll have been fiercely debated by commentators and historians of music. It is general agreement that it arose in the southern United States, a region that would produce most of the major early rock and roll acts through the meeting of various influences that embodied a merging of African musical traditions with European instrumentation, a migration of many former slaves and their descendants to major urban cities such as St. Louis, Memphis, New York City, Detroit, Cleveland, and Buffalo, meant that black and white residents were living in close proximity in larger numbers than ever before. As a result, each heard each other's music and began to emulate others' fashions. Radio stations that made white and black forms of music available to both groups. The development and spread of the gramophone record and African American musical styles such as jazz and swing, which were taken by white musicians, aided by this process of cultural collision. Other artists with early rock and roll hits included Chuck Berry, Bo Diddley, Little Richard, Jerry Lee Lewis, and Gene Vincent. Chuck Berry's 1955 classic Maybelline, in particular, features a distorted electric guitar solo with warm overtones created by his small valve amplifier. However, the use of distortion was predated by electric blues guitarists such as Joe Hill Lewis, Guitar Slim Willie Johnson of Howlin' Wolves Band, and Pat Hare. The latter two also made use of distorted power chords in the early 1950s. Rockabilly, usually but not exclusively, refers to the type of rock and roll music which was played and recorded in the mid-1950s, primarily by white singers such as Elvis Presley, Carl Perkins, Johnny Cash, Jerry Lee Lewis, who drew mainly on the country roots of music. Elvis Presley was greatly influenced and incorporated his style of music with some of the greatest African American musicians like B.B. King, Chuck Berry, Fats Domino. His style of music combined with black influences created controversy during a turbulent time in history, but that did not stop them from creating what we call rock and roll. Some commentators have suggested a decline of rock and roll in the late 1950s and early 1960s. By 1959, the deaths of Buddy Holly, the Big Bopper, and Ritchie Valens in a plane crash. February 1959, the departure of Elvis for service in the United States Army, March 1958. The retirement of Little Richard to become a preacher, October 1957. The scandal surrounding Jerry Lee Lewis's marriage to his 13-year-old cousin, May 1958. The arrest of Chuck Berry, December 1959. And the breaking of the Payola scandal, implicating major figures, including Alan Freed, in bribery and corruption, in prompting individual acts or songs November 1959 gave a sense that the initial phase of rock and roll had come to an end. During the late 1950s and early 1960s, the raw sounds of Elvis Presley, Gene Vincent, Jerry Lee Lewis, Buddy Holly were commercially superseded by a more polished commercial style of rock and roll. Marketing frequently emphasized the physical looks of the artist rather than the music, contributing to the successful careers of Rick Nelson, Tommy Sam, Bobby Vee, and the Philadelphia trio of Bobby Rydell, Frankie Avalon, and Fabian, who all became teen idols.
In the 1950s, Britain was well placed to receive American rock and roll music and culture. It shared a common language and had been exposed through culture through the stationing of troops and shared many social developments, including the emergence of synth youth subculture, which in Britain included Teddy Boys and the Rockers. Trad jazz became popular and many of its musicians were influenced by related American styles, including boogie woogie and the blues. The skiffle craze, led by Lonnie Donegan, utilized amateurish versions of American folk songs and encouraged many of the subsequent generation of rock and roll, initially through films including Blackboard Jungle, 1955, and Rock Around the Clock, 1955. Both movies contain the early in his comic Rock Around the Clock, which first entered the British charts early 1955. 4 months before it reached the US pop charts, topped British charts later that year, and again in 1956, and helped identify rock and roll with teenage delinquency.
Rock and roll influenced lifestyles, fashion, attitudes, and language. In addition, rock and roll may have contributed to the civil rights movement because both African American and white American teens enjoyed the music. Many early rock and roll songs dealt with issues of cars, schools, dating, and clothing. The lyrics of rock and roll songs described events and conflicts that most listeners could relate to through personal experience.
Several rock historians have claimed that rock and roll was one of the first genres to define an age group. It gave teenagers a sense of belonging, even when they were alone. Rock and roll is often identified with the emergence of teen culture among the first baby boomer generation, who had greater relative affluence and leisure time, and adopted rock and roll as a part of a distinct subculture. This involved not just music, record buying, jukeboxes, and TV programs like American Bandstand, but also extend to film, clothes, hair, cars, and motorbikes in distinct language.
From its early 1950s beginnings through the early 1960s, rock and roll spawned new dance crazes, including the twists. Teenagers found the syncopated backbeat rhythm especially suited to reviving big band era, jitterbug dancing, sock hops, school and church gym dances, and home basement dance parties became the rage, and American teens watched Dick Clark's American Bandstand to keep up on the latest dance and fashion styles. From the mid-1960s on, as rock and roll was rebranded as rock, later dance genres followed, leading to funk, disco, house techno, and hip-hop. Thanks for watching
this Adventurous Kids episode.
Yeah!